Okay, assalamu alaikum, dear students. So now, after finishing talking about Old English, if you remember in the previous video, we talked about Beowulf and the features of the epic and what that poem talked about. Now we will move away from the Old English to the Middle English or the medieval ages, Middle English literature, and that's from the 11th century up to the beginning of the 16th century. So 1066 to 1480. At that time, at the political level, the Norman settled in northern France at the beginning of the 10th century, observed culture and language of the later Roman Empire, and spoke a Latinized French. They were loyal to the French king, and their ruler held the title Duke. William, Duke of Normandy, conquered England and set himself on the throne. I think these historical information or background are enough. Oh, sorry. Now, okay. So this is the historical background, okay? After that, what happened in the English society is that those actually Normans, they introduced the feudal system into the country. What do you mean by the feudal system? اللي هو النظام الإقطاعي, which can be seen as a pyramid with the king at the top and the serfs of the Norman lords at the very bottom. In between, displaced Anglo-Saxons ranged according to rank and power. French language of ruling race, English language was the language of common people. So you can imagine the society like a pyramid. At the top is the king, and then the rest of the people are arranged according to their power and their richness. Now, the language of the rich people was French, while the language of the poor people or common people was English. So until that time, English language didn't have such a status or standard status in the country. It wasn't an important language. Okay, fine. So literature in English came to a standstill for 200 years because now French dominated the literature. It is the first language. It is the formal language of the country. So people were not actually encouraged to write in English. However, in the 12th and the 13th centuries appeared the lyric and ballad. The ballad, those are oral forms of poetry, اللي هو الشعر الشفوي. Anglo-French literature had powerful influence upon English literature throughout the Middle English period. So what was the dominant? The French literature, not the English literature. The English literature was in the shadow and it was affected by the French literature. So we will see that many of the ideas are actually taken, and the stories in the poems are taken from the French literature. Now, Norman writers were inspired by the stories of the legendary Celtic King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. أعتقد سمعتوا فيها الملك آرثر وفرسان الطاولة المستديرة. It is a very well-known actually story or legend. If you have seen in the movies, they always say one for all and all for one. So that was the motto of King Arthur and the knights اللي هم الفرسان, the Knights of the Round Table. One for all and all for one. So they protected each other and they were loyal to each other. Now, at that time, the type of poetry that appeared in English is called the ballad. The ballad. So what do you mean by the ballad? It is a short, anonymous narrative poem. Anonymous because we don't know who wrote it, okay? It is a short, anonymous narrative poem, tells a story sung by common people, okay? The singer alter parts of the existing ballad to suit the time, place, and audience. Hence, several versions of a ballad were produced. So this ballad or poem was sung by different people. So every time a person wants to sing it and he moves to another country, for example, to another city, to another village, to another area, he will make changes in the story in order to suit the time and the place and the audience. If the audience are, for example, of noble origin, if they are of common people, if they are carpenters, if they are farmers. So you will find that the singers will change in the words in order to make the people enjoy the new version. That's why we have several versions of the same ballad. Now, the ballad is usually composed of stanzas. بتتذكروا المقاطع الشعرية. Mainly, the ballad stanza consists of 4 lines. The first and third lines have 4 iambic feet each. The second and the fourth only 3, and these lines rhyme. إذا عادة المقطوعة الشعرية في البلد بتتكون من المقطوعة طبعا اللي هي زي فقرات هم بتتقسم عندهم القصيدة. فالفقرة اللي هي ستانزا بتكون مكونة من 4 lines، من 4 أسطر. The first and the third lines have 4 iambic feet each. الأولى والثالثة، السطر الأول والسطر الثالث إلهم نفس الوزن الشعري. السطر الثاني والسطر الرابع إلهم نفس الوزن الشعري. كمان السطر الأول والثالث rhyme with each other، يعني إلهم نفس القافية. السطر الثاني والرابع بيكون إلهم نفس القافية. Is this clear? I hope so. Okay. So sometimes one or more lines were repeated. Okay. The repetition is called a refrain and encourages the listener to join in with the minstrel or the singer. تعرفوا في أحيانا في زي الأغنية لما بيكون فيها أبيات تكرر، فكل يعني فكرة جديدة بعدها هذه الأبيات تكرر، فهذا بيعطي الفرصة للمستمعين أنهم يشاركوا في ترديد الأغنية. Okay, the 18th century ballads collected and put down in writing. So until the 18th century, the ballads were only orally sung, but after that they were written down. Okay, now let's come to one of the most important figures in the medieval ages, and he is considered as the father actually of English literature. His name is Geoffrey Chaucer. Geoffrey Chaucer was born in 1340 and passed away in 1400. So it seems that he lived only 60 years. Poor man. Okay, he grew up during the medieval ages, okay, and that time it was the most prosperous period. Okay, so actually they considered this period the beginning of the Renaissance. The people started to get better situation. Also a period of war. Renaissance also is related to the changes in thinking actually. Also a period of war, though it was a prosperous period, but there was a war between England and France at that time. The war continued for 100 years. Okay. Also there was a plague اللي هو مرض الطاعون spread in the country and resulted in the death of many people. However, what is the most important for us is that there were many cultural changes. The whole society was changing. Okay, English native literature came into existence. That's why we call Geoffrey Chaucer as the father of English literature, because from that time the English literature started to exist. Okay. Another thing related to the medieval ages is that it was the age of skepticism and satire. Skepticism اللي هو التشكيك، الشك في كل شيء، الشك في المعتقدات المجتمعية، في المعتقدات الدينية، في المعتقدات الفردية. أي معتقدات كانت شائعة في ذلك الوقت أصبح الإنسان يشكك فيها and satire ويسخر منها. Okay? Faith and authority were losing hold on the people. So at that time, faith, the religion. Okay? So faith is connected with the church here. So when you think of faith, you think of a church. And the authority, the king. So those two were collaborating to control people and keep him under the control. But during the medieval ages, Geoffrey Chaucer age, the people started to become skeptic about those authorities, to mock them, to focus on their mistakes and try to highlight them and criticize them. Okay? Chaucer made fun of representatives of the church who lived off the toil of poor peasants. يعني تخيلوا صار يعمل ايه، يسخر من المسؤولين في الكنيسة اللي هم كان يعتبرهم بيعتاشوا أو يعيشون على استغلال الناس الفقراء. He was amused by the kings in human nature. So when we say kings here, we mean the imperfection, the flaw, يعني الأخطاء أو الإشكاليات اللي بتكون، النواقص اللي بتكون في الطبيعة البشرية. Okay? Fine. Of course, Chaucer, we are talking about Chaucer. Chaucer also belonged to the growing class of tradesmen, but after marriage gained royal favor and was sent on diplomatic missions to France and Italy. So mainly he was a trader or a tradesman, but later because he got married to a woman from the royal family, he became involved in the diplomatic work. Okay? He drew heavily upon both Italian and French writers of the period. If you remember, we said that before Chaucer's time, there wasn't something called English literature. It stalled for 200 years. لمدة 200 سنة ما كانش فيه أي إنتاجية في الأدب الإنجليزي. So when Chaucer decided to write, he depended mainly on the Italian and the French writers of that period. Okay. Now his poems cover a wide range of subjects and his characters are both vibrant and real. So unlike the literature in the Old English, in which, if you remember, we said that we focus on heroes of noble origins. Here, no. He actually focused on different types of characters. Those characters are not supernatural. Those characters are not imaginative, are not legendary, not mythological. They are real people. And we will see in his examples that he talked about common people. The writer was not applauded at that time in his age. The writer was not applauded for his originality, but for his performance. So the stories were freely adapted and retold by prominent writers. يمكن حد منكم يحكي طب معنى هيك تشوسر كان بيعتمد على الكتاب الإيطاليين والفرنسيين في الحصول على أفكاره. إذن هو he wasn't original، يعني ما كانش يعني مبدع في عمله أو خلاق في عمله، ما جاب شيء جديد. At that time it wasn't a problem. Okay? What the society cared about was your ability to take the story and change it and make changes, adapt it, يعني تعمل فيها تغيير, and then retell it. If your version is excellent in its presentation, then there is no problem. You will be applauded for that. Applauded يعني يصفق للشخص. Okay? Fine. Now, his poems were either translations or adaptation from other extant works on the continent. عشان هيك his poems weren't actually originated or mainly written by him. No, they were translations or adaptation. إما كان بترجم أو بيقتبس وبطورها بطريقة ما حتى تصبح for him like part of his poems. What makes Chaucer unique is his humanity, his gentle irony, and his irrepressible humor. Now, let's come to explain this. He was unique because he focused on the ordinary people, on common people. He cared more about peasants, for example, الناس العاميين اللي بيخدموا, more than the noble people. So that's why we say that he is unique in his humanity. His gentle irony. Yes, he criticized the people in authority or in the church for their bad deeds and corruption, but actually he also actually criticized the normal people, the common people, because they used to do silly things, okay? But his irony was gentle. He didn't attack people in his words, but he was speaking gently. He was actually highlighting their mistakes, but in a hidden or indirect way. And his irrepressible humor, you will feel that you want to laugh when you read, because the words that he used would make the humor comes up and you would feel amused reading his poems. Chaucer was the father, as I mentioned before, was the father of English, and he ranks with other great poets such as Milton and Shakespeare, okay? He's not less than that. Okay. Now, some of Chaucer's themes, because we will come to read his Canterbury Tales. So what are the themes that spread in his writing is satire of the aristocratic hero figure. If you remember, we said that the hero in the past was of noble origins, had supernatural abilities, was full of courage, okay, and great deeds. So what he did here, Chaucer, is that he criticized and he mocked the aristocratic hero figure, because this type of figure doesn't really exist, okay? The second theme was comic revelation of the foibles of love. So foibles here, the weaknesses, okay? The weaknesses, the flaws of love, and also models of marriage relationships, and finally ideals of love and sacrifice, okay? The one that we will focus on today, inshallah, is satire, but not of aristocratic hero figure. We will look at a satire of a woman who is a nun يعني راهبة, and a religious person. So we will see his, inshallah, later we will see his satire on that. Okay, now we said we will look at the Canterbury Tales. The Canterbury Tales is considered as Chaucer's masterpiece. يعني أعظم شيء كتبه Chaucer was the Canterbury Tales. It's a collection of stories. طبعا this is a poem, a long poem, okay? But it is a collection of stories held together by a framed tale. Okay, الآن إذا بتتذكروا ألف ليلة وليلة، كيف ألف ليلة وليلة؟ هي عبارة عن مجموعة من القصص، ولكن إيش الإطار العام إلها؟ قصة شهرزاد وشهريار. إحنا يعني بنقرأ أو بنحضر قصص داخل قصة، فهمتوا؟ فأنا في عندي هنا في الكانتربري تيلز في عندي فريم، في عندي إطار قصة خارجي، أوكي، وفي داخله راح يكون نسمع قصص مختلفة. They were about 24. What is left for us today are about 24 tales from the Canterbury Tales. So Chaucer invented a pilgrimage and had the pilgrims tell discreet tales. إذا إحنا القصيدة الإطار العام إلها وتصور على أساس إنه هي رحلة حج، رايحين يحجوا، والحجاج اللي طالعين يحجوا كل واحد منهم بيحكي قصة. فإحنا بنشوف الحجاج، والحجاج بعد هيك بيعطونا قصص. يعني إحنا كيف النتيجة هذه؟ لكننا في مربع، في إطارين. الإطار الأول هو الإطار العام رحلة الحج، الإطار الثاني هو أطر صغيرة للقصص اللي هدول الحجاج رايحين يحكوها إلنا. أوكي؟ Fine. So, sorry, I didn't change. So, Chaucer invented a pilgrimage and had the pilgrims tell discreet tales. The Canterbury Tales consists of the stories told by the 29 pilgrims on their way to Saint Thomas Becket's shrine. shrine اللي هو زي الضريح. إيش نسميه؟ shrine اللي هو it's a sacred place where they go to worship. مقام، أيوة بالضبط، مقام زي بنسميه مقام القديس توماس بيكت in Canterbury، في منطقة اسمها كانتربري. Harry Bailey, the host, had proposed a scheme in the general prologue whereby each pilgrim was to narrate 2 tales on the way to Canterbury and 2 more while returning. And the one who tells the best story, okay, will be given dinner paid for it by the other pilgrims. Okay, then this is the tale frame, the frame of our tale. Okay, and we started with the host in the tale. طبعا هذه القصة إنه هاري بيلي، القصة بدايتها إنه المضيف تبعهم في هذه الحانة بيكونوا هم في حانة، أوكي، في أثناء الاستراحة في رحلتهم للحج، فهو بيقترح عليهم إنه شو رأيكم وانتوا رايحين تقرأوا وتحكوا لبعض، كل واحد فيكم يحكي قصتين وانتوا راجعين يحكي قصتين، واللي بيحكي أفضل قصة بيكون معزوم على العشاء مجانا على حساب الحجاج الباقيين. Okay, so this is the frame of our Canterbury Tales. Okay, the whole range of طبعا of F is missing. Society is represented in this poem except the very highest classes, which is the nobility, and the very lowest, the riff-raff. إذن he took, or Chaucer focused on the middle class because this was the expanding class actually. More and more people were becoming part of the middle class. So they are not noble, but they are not poor. Okay? He shows the power of romance and the power of the vulgar also. So you will find the contradiction in his poems. You can see examples of romance, of great things, of good things, but also you can see the power of the vulgar, the bad things, the corrupted things. Okay. For example, let's look at an example of romance and vulgar. For example, in The Knight's Tale في أحد المسافرين بيعطينا قصته اسمه نايت اللي هو الفارس. The Knight's Tale, Chaucer gives an exalted version of eternal triangle. The eternal triangle, 2 young men, Arcite and Palamon, love the gentle, virtuous Emily. So here he shows us the romantic type of love. 2 men, okay, and they love the same woman. And this woman is virtuous, gentle, إنسانة، يعني التنين شباب، okay، محترمين، لكنهم واقعين في حب امرأة أو صبية اللي هي إيميلي. إيميلي إنسانة يعني gentle و virtuous، يعني خلوقة ومحترمة ومؤدبة، فعشان هيك التنين بحبوها. okay, this is a romantic and good actually example of love. While on the other hand we have another example in which in the Miller's Tale. ميلر واحد من الحجاج اسمه ميلر بيحكي، اللي هو الميلر بيحكي لنا تيل القصة. إيش القصة تبعته بتكون عن إيش؟ We get a coarser version of the same triangle, a different version, but this is a bad version, a vulgar version of the same triangle. Nicholas and Absalom, both in love with the carpenter's lusty young wife. So this is not a romantic love. This is physical love, which is based on lust and love of body. Okay, so you can compare between the 2 stories. The story of the 2 young men who are polite, who are well behaved, and they love this girl who is gentle, virtuous, and polite. While on the other side, you have the vulgar people, السوقيين, in which they fell in love with a married woman. Emily there is not married, but here the woman is married. She is the carpenter's wife. So she's married, but she is allowing herself to have an affair with two other men. So this is the bad version of the story. Okay? So that's what Canterbury Tales show us, the contradictions in the society. The astonishing variety of tales, their wealth of character and their faithful depiction of medieval life in England make the Canterbury Tales the work of a poet who, besides being acquainted with court life as well as with common people, a sympathetic humorist who painted life as he saw it and allowed his readers to draw the moral. إذن إحنا الكانتربري تيلز الشرح والتفاصيل اللي بيعطينا فيها والشخصيات الممثلة للمجتمع في ذلك الوقت بتعطي صورة كاملة عن المجتمع في العصور الوسطى. وكمان غير هيك انه هي بتظهر لنا صورة الشاعر اللي هو الساخر، اوكي، الساخر من الحياة في ذلك الوقت، بيعطينا اياها بصورة لطيفة ملطفة. سخريته من الاحداث والناس والحياة في ذلك الوقت بتكون ملطفة بطريقة غير مباشرة، وبتعطي فرصة للريدر انه يستنتج الدرس اللي هو بيحاول يوصلنا له. اوكي، طيب let's come to طبعا at the beginning of the Canterbury Tales we have the general prologue. The general prologue sets the frame of the tale, and then we go to the stories one after one. So what do we have in the general prologue? The narrator opens the general prologue with a description of the return of spring. The narrator tells us that as he prepared to go on such a pilgrimage, staying at a tavern اللي هو نفسه الحانة، okay, pub, in Southwark called the Tabard Inn, tavern و inn, okay, a great company of 29 travelers entered. The travelers were a diverse group who, like the narrator, were on their way to Canterbury. They happily agreed to let him join them. That night, the group slept at the Tabard and woke up early the next morning to set off on their journey. Okay? There is in Chaucer's work an intense, all-pervading humor. إذن إحنا من البداية من الجنرال برولوج اللي بدأ فيه شرح مقدمة القصائد، المقدمة تبعت القصائد، من البداية لو قرأنا we will see that there is humor. Okay, there is a humor, and in the description of the 29 people, because he will present the 29 people first for us, the description is humorous. Okay, so let's come to talk about the work of Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales, because we will come to one of the examples. You will notice that during reading Chaucer's work that there is intense, all-pervading humor. However, this humor is mixed with irony and satire. Okay, but this satire رغم انه السخرية والانتقاد, this satire is always mild and gentle. I think I mentioned that. He never tries to hurt the feelings of the people because he didn't have any ill will or spite or cynicism. Okay, so his intention or his intentions were good. So his words also were gentle. صح أنا بنتقد ولكن كان ينتقد ولكن كان ينتقي الألفاظ إنها تكون مخففة وبطريقة مرحة، بينتقد فيها بطريقة غير مباشرة. هو يعني وانت بتقرأ بتحس إنه هو بيمدح، ولكن إذا تعمقت في المعنى بنجد أنه هو في سخرية من الموقف أو سخرية من الشخص، ولكن بطريقة مخفية، زي sugar coated، مغطية بالسكر هيك. okay. So he lashes his victims not only gently but almost affectionately. okay. يعني حتى من كتر ما هو كان بسيط في كلماته وسهلة كلماته، كان يظهر حتى حب للأشخاص اللي هو بيوصفهم. So striking indeed is the amount of satire which is introduced to the character sketches. It's repeated, the character sketches of the prologue. Many of the pilgrims are depicted as abusing their jobs or offices. إذا ليه هو في عنده satire؟ ليه في عنده irony؟ ليه الانتقاد اللي كان بينتقده؟ لأنه كان بيشوف إنه كتير من اللي طالعين على الحج هم أشخاص بيستغلوا وظائفهم ومواقعهم المركزية من أجل الحصول، من أجل مصالحهم الخاصة. okay. For example, 3 of the churchmen اللي هم المفترض يعني قدوة في المجتمع are charged with types of racketeering and corruption widespread in Chaucer's time. يبقى كانوا متهمين بالفساد اللي كان منتشر في ذلك الوقت. Though they were churchmen. That was reprehensible because the agents were men of some education and pretended to be spiritual guides of the people. تخيل لما يكون رجال دين وبيدعوا إن هم ناس متعلمين وإن هم القادة الروحانيين للناس ويكونوا متهمين بالفساد. This is reprehensible، يعني منفر ومؤلم. Also you have the physician for instance is thirsty for gold. He sells and resells stale pies. يعني الكعكات اللي بيكونوا خربوا بدل ما يرميهم بيرجع ببكتهم وبيبيعهم للناس. okay. Just as the pardoner confesses later that he sells sheep's bones as relics of saints. تخيلوا كمان pardoner, these are like religious men who sells religious books and religious items. يعني مفترض انهم منخرطين في الاديان وانه في الدين، وانهم بيعطوا الانسان اشياء يتقرب منها من الكنيسه، فكانوا بيبيعوهم عظام الخرفان على اساس انه هي عظام مين saints. sorry the saints. what do you mean by the saints؟ اللي هم القديسين. كانوا يبيعوا الناس عظام خرفان على أساس إنها عظام القديسين، فيأخذها الإنسان عشان يتقرب ويدعو وكأنه يعني بتقرب من الله. okay. from their God of course, not from our Allah. okay.